Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of many Fit4Micro webinars as part of a series to share the incoming and then final results of this EU-funded project. So we're very pleased to have our first webinar, and we'll be focusing specifically on technology development and sustainability. And we're very fortunate to hear from two experts, one focusing on LCA, or life cycle analysis for better environmental system performance, followed by making tech development and bridging invisible gender gaps. But before we get to these speakers, I'm going to first introduce Michel, who is also the CEO and co-founder of Metis, but for today's purposes, he's also the coordinator of the Fit4Micro project. And we've asked Michel to walk us through an introduction of the project from a technical perspective and what we hope to achieve by the end of the project. So with that said, Michel, I'll give you the floor to introduce the project before we get to our two speakers.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I always like to see myself like this because, it's not it's not a very recent photo. So, okay, let me just share. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Wait, because I have a lot of the... Do you see the Zoom stuff, or it's not present? I don't think it's present, right?
No, you just have to go to full screen.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so hello everyone. So I'm pleased actually to introduce this, well, let's say to kick off the first seminar on a webinar on Fit4Micro, and I would like to introduce you the project and to give you some insight, mostly focused on technical aspects, without saying that what my other colleagues will say are not technical. That's not true, but I would say more like deep tech hardware stuff. So what is Fit4Micro? So it's an EU project, and which is focusing on developing, let's say, novel methodology, novel systems in order to reach our targets as a reduction of carbon in heating mostly, and in general, actually, energy usage. And we all know that one of the very important thing, to be able to reach Fit for 55, and then afterwards actually to be carbon neutral, is to switch off from fossil fuels, which actually for heating, and especially into the building segment, is known to be hard to abate and will require not a single solution, but probably a combination of multiple systems to really reach basically efficiency and carbon neutrality. So we can certainly say that we have to have to reduce our primary consumptions, and this by better insulating our let's say, buildings, but also by having, let's say, probably more efficient heating systems. We cannot do all electrification. It would be very difficult, let's say, for the grid to support all electrifications of all heat pumps. We certainly need also to look at, let's say, carbon-less fuels. So not fossil fuels, but fuels which are coming from, for example, synthesis using renewable electricity and using carbon, for example, to carry on the energy. So that I mean by that, certain types of biofuels, biomass or biogas, things like this. So at the end, actually, the idea is to combine systems together in order to have something very efficient. And in Fit4Micro, what we are looking at is a combination of micro combined heat and power and cooling, which is based on a micro gas turbine system, and to use actually biofuels as let's say, the primary energy supply to the heating electricity system, which is the micro gas turbine. And that biofuel comes from basically a process called hydrotreated pyrolysis, which is using some residues or waste biomass and turn it into something that we can easily transport and use in the, let's say, the building segments. And so with the micro CHP system, or CHCP, because it can do also cooling, We can do heating, we can do cooling, but we can also do power. And so that's how we want to greenify basically our building. So the project started in 2022. It has been lasting for 48 months, so it's quite finished, closed in September this year. A budget of 5 million euro, and it's also a research innovation action, aggregating in the very beginning 9 partners, now 8 because one of us actually left. We are the coordinator MITIS. We have other SMEs like BTG inside of the project. We have a large institute like Fraunhofer, universities like Aalborg University, University of Mons, and smaller research centers like OWI, which is affiliated to RWTH Aachen. Cogen Europe is part of the project as well, and the ETA is taking care of dissemination of the project. So we have a structure which is relatively classical for European projects, where we have, let's say, management and coordination, surrounded by dissemination, communication, and exploitation, and the activity today is part of this WP8. We have technical work packages, and I will be mostly focusing on them today, from work package 2 to work package 5. And we have also life cycle analysis and the economic impact of the project, together with outlook in policy and market, and also what we can do actually to penetrate the market with this system. If we go to the, let's say, to the technical work packages, so we have one focused on biofuel, one focused on very clean combustion, one which is more on the microgas turbine, and the rest is, let's say, focusing more on a system level. Let's say I structured my presentation, which is highly technical, let's say, on 4 main innovations we have been, or main developments we have been carried out in the project. So one of them is the development of a novel thermodynamic cycle for the microgas turbine, which combines intercooling, multi-combustion staging, and also humidification of the cycle. So I will talk about it. We have a second innovation which is mostly focused on a flameless combustion, which is a special combustion regime where we can achieve very low NOx, which is also a greenhouse gas, and which is very versatile in the sense of the capacity to burn different kinds of fuel. And it actually is quite interesting for burning this biofuel, which is also quite special. So the third innovation is focused on the biofuel itself, which is produced by pyrolysis of residues or waste biomass, typically residue of wood, for example, and minimal ingress of hydrogen in order to stabilize the fuel. And the rest of, let's say, the last innovation is the coupling of our system microgas turbine together with heat pumps, compression, vapor compression heat pump, but also adsorption chiller to broaden basically the usage of the microgas turbine, and storage, and to see what kind of building actually can be interesting for that kind of system. So my presentation will be, let's say, focusing a little bit on the 4. Give you some synopsis without going into too much details. So before entering into these innovations, just have a look actually at what we are trying to achieve, which is this combined system. We are combining gas turbine, which is called this block in MGT. We always have some sort of a backup boiler because it's sometimes difficult to achieve, let's say, the heat demand in the very cold weather, for example, which sometimes appear only a couple of days in the year. So this MGT and backup boiler will use the fuel, the biofuel. In the system, we also bring electricity coming from PVs in the good time, let's say, in the good weather time. We, of course, can be also connected to the grid, or we could be off-grid. And we actually use the MGT to produce electricity. So this is where you have this purple line there, injected into, let's say, the bus of the building. But also heat. Heat can be used for domestic hot water, can be used also for heating, obviously. So that's why we store it, or we can store it. And the heat can be either directly provided to the building in order to do heating, but also, for example, to an absorption chiller in the good time, in the good summer, for example, or where we need cooling, in order to produce cooling from the heat. That obviously will broaden the range of application of the microgas turbine. So that the idea is always actually to be able to have, I would say, kind of an independency of the grid typically. So that system could be, let's say, it's a very decentralized production of all the energy that you want to use, which is electricity, heating, and cooling, relying on a biofuel, which is a renewable energy, and solar, for example, from the PV. We have the attempt to be as much as possible dependent on the grid, for example, in order to alleviate also the burden on the grid, which because of the onset of electric cars and everything and all the heat pumps is, of course, being loaded more and more. So at the end of the projects, we want to reach TRL5, and the TRL5 is basically a container, so that's not very nice because it's closed. But in that container, you have all the systems. So you have the microgas turbine, you have storage of heat, you have vapor compression, you have adsorption chiller, and you have, let's say, the distribution of the different energy. And we will be testing this. It's going to be it's going to be ready in a very soon, actually, and everything will be tested together. So let's focus on the first innovation, which is this novel thermodynamic cycle. So a gas turbine is something which is quite nice from the CHP point of view. So that's a basic recuperated Brayton cycle. We have electricity, let's say, in the range of 30% of efficiency. And all the heat basically can be withdrawn from the economizer here in the cycle after the recuperator to produce, let's say, the heat that will be used by the building one way or another, or by the adsorption chiller. And you can certainly reach at least 80% efficiency overall, even more, perhaps 90-95% efficiency, depending on the way actually we do it. So the microgas turbine has this advantage of relatively high output temperature. So it can be used indeed to produce hot water, could be used also for steam or for some other stuff. So this simple recuperated cycle is the basis of our M10 microgas turbine, which will be the basis of the novel cycle, which is called M20 in the sense because it's producing 20 kilowatts. And so what we have into this gas turbine is different things. The flameless combustor that you see here, which is going to be used also inside of the project and extended to high pressure for the high pressure stage. Turbo generator, which is operating on airfoil bearing, so no oil into the system. So you don't want to have expensive maintenance every year. So no oil to change means very little maintenance. So that's what we have. And then we have also a turbo generator, which is operating 100,000 RPM without coupling, with a magnet which is in the shaft here, which is really the hard part of the difficult part of a gas turbine, let's say. And that turbo generator is also what will be present into the novel cycle, except that we are making one also which operates at higher pressure, so different wheels, but exactly the same architecture, exactly the same bearings. We have the recuperator here, which is not the economizer, which is an air heat exchanger, and we have a power electronics which is capable of withdrawing about 10 kilowatts from this turbo generator. I show it to you because it's the basics, let's say, of the novel cycle that we are implementing. And indeed, so the cycle that we are implementing, which is called humidified intercooled regenerative reheat gas turbine cycle, from call it micro head for humidified cycle. You see this low pressure compressor, low pressure turbine. That's exactly what I showed you before, with LPCC, which is your low pressure combustor. But we are adding a stage, which is this high pressure turbine, same shaft, same bearing, same electric stator, producing also 10 kilowatts. So we have 10 kilowatt here, 10 kilowatt here, total 20 kilowatt. The two compressors are linked by an intercooler, which is reducing then the overall work of the compression because you are, let's say, a little closer to an isothermal compression. You have the recuperator, which I showed you before, And we have a new combustor here, which is the high pressure combustor. So two combustor, intercooler, recuperator, call it intercooled regenerative reheat gas turbine. If you implement that cycle and you do it right, you can certainly go to electrical efficiency for big machines, which could be in the range of 40%. For us, it's still a small machine. You're not going to be able to reach this 40%, maybe 35% or something like this. Now, how do you do it? How do you move to humidifications, and why do you do humidification? What we want is we want to be flexible with the heat. So we produce heat here. We can use the heat, but it would be interesting also that we can perhaps recycle that heat inside of the cycle. So the idea here is to produce steam or hot water, let's say, which can be re-injected inside of the cycle. And there are multiple ways of doing it. One of them is direct injection of water, just spraying water directly into the stream coming from the compressor. Another more sophisticated way of doing it is to use a saturation tower, which is located here. And that saturation tower, you will be able to put more water than if you would just do injection of water. And so it has two effects. It will actually increase the power of the machine a little bit, and it will also increase its efficiency. So we can do it on the simple cycle, typically the M10 machine, or we can do it same way on the Micro 20 machine here after the high pressure compression. And because you are higher pressure, it's a little bit better, in fact. And that's what we saw in all the analysis that we have performed. If we take the M20, so this two-stage machine, trying to get my mouse, two-stage machine here, we can get an improvement of electrical efficiency, which is significant, 8.4%. If we do direct injection, 6.5%. And basically, with respect to the M10, we were 6%. So we are increasing from the M10 already the efficiency 6%. So you have 0.4 improvement and about 2.3% by using the microhead. The M10 is here. Let's say it's the basics. If we do injection, we get a little bit more, and microhead, we get also 1.3% improvement of efficiency. Initially, we were all focusing on the microhead because this is the best. But at the end, what we see is it's also very complicated to implement. So that's the saturation tower, which for a small machine, from a cost point of view, it's probably quite difficult to, let's say, imagine. Direct injection of water is already interesting and can already allow a gain. So that's the improvement with respect to the basic single recuperated cycle. With this two-stage microhead humidified, you can get 8.4 improvement, which is typically from a 30% cycle of gas turbine, recuperated, simple recuperated, you could get to 38%, which is really significant. What about flameless combustion? That's our second big activity into the project. And what is it? So flameless combustion is quite interesting, in terms of the name, because usually you think about combustion with a flame. And indeed, conventional combustion, lean combustion, for example, premix, you would see a blue flame, for example, which is produced by the resonating hydrocarbons ions. When you go to flameless, it's quite funny because at the end you don't see anything. And you think that your combustor is not burning, but it's still very much burning. But you are in a regime of combustion where basically your temperature has decreased significantly. Your temperature decrease, your combustion efficiency increase, and your pollutant is decreasing. So you think it's the miracle, let's say, a combustor. True, some way, it's miracle. It has also its drawbacks. For example, it's quite big because you need heavy recirculation of the flue gas inside of the combustor. That Mitty's flameless combustor looks like this. Let's say if you would have a lean premix combustor, it would be half of the size. Here it's a bigger size, but it has this advantage of capacity of very low NOx and also of capacity of burning everything. So in this combustor, we are injecting gas in the middle here, or fuel. If it's liquid fuel, you have an atomizer. and then air is actually injected through this injector here. We inject with a certain speed in such a way that we have high recirculation of the flow. We detach basically the flame. There's no flame. Combustion takes place here. And thanks to the big recirculation, we have self-ignition of the mixture, and then it goes out like this, remix, and goes to the turbine. So that's a little snapshot. So we do a lot of simulation of this. So that's a basic axisymmetric simulation where you can see that the temperature is in the back of the flame combustor, flame tube, where we have also the OH radicals. OH radicals is a very good marker of where the combustion is taking place. If you would have flame, you would see OH here. No flame, you have OH into this region, and the temperature of the mixture, let's say here, is 14, no more than 1400 degrees C. Rather than if you have a premix, for example, lean premix, you will reach in the flame 2200 degrees C, and then you will have onset of NOx. That's a simulation, for example, of with CFD of methane combustion compared to experiments, and we can go as low as basically lower than 3 ppm or even lower than that in the regime where the combustor is operating. So we have been working on this flameless combustor and improve it actually for biofuel. Biofuel which are made using this pyrolysis of residues and minimal ingress of hydrogen. So just to give a word, so this is developed by a company called BTG. And the principle is that you have biomass, which is coming into a reactor where you have sands, in fact, very hot sands, that is producing gas. Gas is condensed. Some of the flue gas is actually used in order to burn, actually, and to create the heat in order the reactor to work. Yeah, I have an animation here. And then we get the pyrolysis gas and pyrolysis oil. And the pyrolysis oil is some sort of a syrup there, which contains still a lot of oxygen. So it's not very stable, but it contains most of the energy actually from the original biomass. So, and this process can reach about 70% of, let's say, all the energy basically that you had initially into your residues. So that's how it looks like, this fast pyrolysis bio oil called FPBO. So it has a relatively low LHV, so 16 megajoule per kilo compared to natural gas, which is 50 megajoule per kilo, something like this. You have also some residues and so on that you don't really like. And usually what they do, they take it directly to the refineries. Actually, they mix with crude oil and then they make the product. But we can make something else out of it. So we can improve it by hydrotreatment, which means we inject hydrogen, remove oxygen, stabilize it, and at the end you get an LHV, which is at the end of the range of 40 megajoule per kilo. And let's say your residues that you have inside now are very, very low. So that is already some sort of fuel you can use. And usually they use, let's say, from this, they could directly create biodiesel, biokerosene, or biogasoline. And in the project, the idea is to use this HPO with the least amount of hydrogen, because hydrogen is very costly. So the cost of your fuel will become higher if you use more hydrogen. And so that's why we have in the abscissa here the hydrogen percentage into that biofuel. And where we want to be situated is something around here. Beyond, it gets very expensive. And then there, actually, that's a nice actually fit for us. So we've been testing, simulating this HPO combustion into our flameless combustor. By simulation is usually giving very good results, very comparable by the way with experiments. So if you look, for example, experiment gives about 6 to 10 ppm of NOx, which is still very, very low. Simulation is a little bit better. And CO2 and O2 and CO in general is a little bit more difficult to predict. So simulation under predict, let's say, or gives too much CO compared to what we have in experiments. But that actually pyrolysis oil burns very well into our combustor without quasi no modifications to the combustor. So OE has been installing, I would say, a sophisticated test bench to test the high pressure combustor, because when we go to higher pressure, 7 bar into the cycle, that's something which is a bit unknown to us. And it has been shown, and we can see the NOx here versus the lambda. Lambda is the amount of air divided by the stoichiometric air for combusting the fuel that you're injecting. And we are in the range of 8 to 10 for the gas turbine. And you can see that here, quasi independently of the grade of HPO. And so the grade means more hydrogen, more treatment, or more cost for the HPO. The combustor is actually behaving very well, reaching to low NOx, burning, no problem. And compared to domestic heating oil, which is a little bit our reference, which is the black one, it's actually working even better than domestic heating oil. So it means after all these campaigns of testings and so on, so we are very confident that we can use liquid biofuel directly into our flameless combustor, the low pressure one and the high pressure one as well. Now, the rest of the project was focused on combining everything together. So combining compression, vapor compression, heat pump, adsorption chiller, storage, the micro turbine. First of all, look at, okay, where can we apply it? What kind of building? And then afterwards also to control it. How can we optimize the system? So Fraunhofer has been developing an Excel sheet. One first thing was called a static calculation, which is an Excel sheet which contains all the thermodynamics of the different components, and where we can simulate on an hour basis, basically how much electricity is produced, how much heat can be taken or consumed by the building, etc. So optimizing the whole system. And at the end, you get nice graphics actually, which shows you how many hours basically your micro gas turbine will operate, because that's no point to buy a gas turbine if at the end actually it doesn't run. So that's the basic thing. So one of the application, for example, was an SME in an industry building SME, where they actually need some cooling. So they use adsorption chillers, but at the same time, they need also the heating of the building and the domestic hot water. And it's located in the north because there, I mean, you need some heating. So they compare different combinations. So that's our machine, the combined heat and cooling power machine, together with a small compression chiller in order to have some backup in case there is a problem, and free cooling modes, compared to the usual practice, which is a compression chiller or compressor chiller alone. And so the idea is to look at energy efficiency, which is basically how much cooling is produced with respect to how much electricity. And you can see, for example, by running this Excel sheet, we can see that we can in fact be very good in terms of primary energy consumption. Another modeling that we are doing is to do what we call a full dynamic system simulation. So with Dimola Modelica, we're actually simulating completely the whole system and its dynamics. So for example, the little brick corresponding to the adsorption chiller is represented by sub Dimola, let's say, model, and all the rest actually, the MGT has also its own Modelica system. So we can simulate completely, I would say, in a much more transient and detailed way. And instead of going by day, now we go by hour, for example, or even lower than an hour. And we can simulate completely the system and see, let's say, its applicability to a particular dynamic supply of energy. In conclusion, to finish this, so we are reaching, let's say, the final line of our project. We had very good, very interesting. First of all, I mean, we had a very good interaction between the consortium members and the partners. So we had a lot of very good, let's say, collaborations. We were able to improve the fast pyrolysis process in order to be able to use low-grade materials, residues, which is very important to decrease the cost and also to look at the minimum amount of hydrogen to use. We demonstrated flameless combustion, very low NOx actually for the hydrotreated pyrolysis oil biofuels. We implemented the novel cycle with airfoil bearings, microgas turbine, and flameless combustion, humidification as well. We did all the coupling. We improved also some adsorption chillers. Actually, I didn't mention it, but Fraunhofer has been working on this. And now we have a complete combination of all the systems together that we are also able to control using, I would say, efficient transient models. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michel, for your introduction to the Fit4Micro project. Very comprehensive. Of course, you can find more information as well on the Fit4Micro website, and also take a look at what we're doing on LinkedIn in terms of social media. More information there as well in a timely manner. So following that introduction to the Fit4Micro project, we're going to move on to our first guest speaker. So I'm very pleased to invite Søren Løkken, who is an associate professor with the Life Cycle Sustainability Group at the University of Aalborg, and he specializes in life cycle impacts in technology and planning projects. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Søren. And for everyone's information, after Søren speaks, there'll be an opportunity to address any questions you may have. So please do use the Q&A function within the Zoom platform. It's a little box with a question mark labeled Q&A. So if you have any questions, just type them in there and we'll try to answer them in either of the two Q&A sessions that we've scheduled in the webinar. So Søren, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the introduction. Good. So I hope I'm sharing now.
Yes, perfect.
Good. Okay, and thank you very much to Michel for the brilliant introduction to what we are dealing with here. So basically, what Michel has been presenting is what we are putting into the life cycle modeling. So what we have here, let's remove this one. Like that. Okay, like this. Okay, good. What we have here is the main system that we are modeling. So we have the biofuel production down here, the actual technology system with the microgas turbine, the adsorption chiller, and the different outputs in the combined system here. So that this is what we are modeling in the system. In terms of the feedstocks, what we present here are 3 feedstock scenarios, like forest residues, contaminated wood, and wheat straws as different types of waste biomass resources that can be put into the biofuel production. And then oh yeah, here it is. And then based on the work from Fraunhofer, we are putting this technology system into different specific geographical and building use case wise use contexts. And this is pretty important because one might think that the environmental performance of a system like this integrated microgas turbine system is like works the same way every place, and you could say of course it does, but its environmental performance depends very much on these contextual factors to how or where the system is being integrated. And this is extremely central. These are some of the major results that we are taking out of the system, and we can see that this is a bit crowded table, I know, but we have the yearly emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from the 3 different use feedstock scenarios here to the right. And what we can see is that the absolute performance of the system, when we take the avoided electricity delivered to the surrounding grids, when we look into the cooling needed, then we can see that the different feedstock scenarios performs quite different, and they perform very different in the different settings they are in, which is actually not so surprising. When we take a northern, well, Scandinavian system background like Helsinki, or a Northern European like Potsdam, we can see that the emissions may be slightly higher compared to a system where we're looking into a Southern European context. The main point we can take out of this is that the feedstock, the choice of the feedstock, can be very decisive. The results that when we compare the microgas turbine system's climate performance with the alternative performance, we can have that forest residues, and especially contaminated wood, can achieve net negative emission profiles, while other resources actually still, even though it might be quite competitive to a default fossil fuel-based energy supply to the housing, it still will or may contribute with a net positive emission profile. So the system context matters a lot. And we have been able to extract and show this very clearly using a consequential life cycle assessment methodology, where we're not only looking into the combustion emissions, but also very much into the alternative feedstock uses and the substitution effects. This means, for instance, that if you are using a bio-based feedstock, the alternative would be fed into local direct heating supply, and the alternative heating supply that the taking of the biomass induces could be, for instance, a coal-based. Then using this bio-based feedstock locally might be quite problematic. This could, for instance, be wheat straw in Eastern Europe in the current situation. So, and this is really a key question when we are working with technologies like this technology, that we are really needing to be smart in where we are installing this technology. We can have a situation where the current situation, it's very advantageous to use the microgas turbine. In a case, if it's an area where you have a decentralized fossil-based heating system, but it's a system area where you, or energy supply area where you might have future district heating based on centralized heat pump systems. I mean, this is not just science. I mean, this is the future in Aalborg, where we are in a few years, for instance. And in that case, this microgas turbine system will not be so competitive. So when you develop a business model on how to implement this technology, it's very important to look into what are the alternative heat sources, what are the alternative uses of the feedstocks being fed in as the fuel for the microgas turbine, and what are the time horizon within which the microgas turbine is advantageous. One of the, I think, very strong sides of this technology is that, as you can see, it can be put into a container, which means that you can actually, it's a movable technology, and you can, when you invest in it, look into what are the time horizon within which it makes sense to use it, and you can build that into the both as a supplier and a selling business model perspective. Put these perspectives in, and secure both a good business and a good environmental performance. One of the things that we are also very clear from this modeling is that there is a very strong need for a use case specific modeling in terms of deciding the right places to implement the technology. And key parameters in making this use case specific modeling is which are the regions, the energy supply systems, and the dynamics of the energy systems, which are the building types, and the energy infrastructure. And I think we are also moving into a time where we will need this kind of modeling to as part of basically as part of the business model. Thanks. I'm looking very much forward to hear the questions that I guess will arise.
Thank you, Soren, for your presentation. We currently don't have any questions in the Q&A function, but maybe everyone is still shy and warming up. So what I suggest is that we move on to the next speaker, and then we just combine the two Q&A functions. So again, everyone, if you do have questions, please place them in the Q&A function, and then our speakers would be happy to address them. If we're not possible in answering them today, because it may require a different work package leader, we're happy to follow up those questions on a bilateral basis as well. So again, don't feel shy. Please do share your questions, your thoughts, or even be provocative. So I'm pleased to move on to our next and last speaker. So I'm very pleased to welcome Sara. She's an associate professor with the Danish Center for Environmental Assessment at the University of Aalborg. And she specializes in social and gendered impacts in technology and planning projects. So we're very pleased to have Sara with us, and we're looking forward to your presentation. And the floor is yours, Sara.
Thank you very much. Just have to manage. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
It's because you have.
You're muted now, Sara.
Okay.
Still a bit of an echo.
Okay. I think we're good now. I just have to share. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with this project from a little bit of a different angle, I'd say, compared to the very technical stuff that we've just heard. So I think it's very fitting to say that now it's now to something completely different, I'd say. So I'll just share my slides. Oops. So, we good?
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay. So, I was tasked with trying to understand what are the gendered attention points related to this kind of technology, or this kind of specific technology. So this is not like a thorough impact assessment, gender impact assessment, but it is a number of attention points related to technologies such as these, and this specific technology in particular. And the way I approached it was via a gender-based analysis plus approach, which is just to get everyone on board. I'll just quickly define what I mean by gender plus. A gender-based analysis is an assessment method that considers the impact of a technology or policies or whatever on a range of different intersecting categories. So that's the plus symbol. So we not only consider gender, the biological sex, but we also consider categories such as ethnicity and age, language, physical, mental disabilities, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. So we might equal it to diversity in a broad sense speaking, but we have the gender plus analysis tool as something that's very specific. So this is what we've used here. And you can see the intersecting categories here: social class, gender, race, ethnicity, and there's a lot of different ones that we've considered during the analysis here, and I'm going to present for you. And then I took a systematic or systemic approach, system approach to impact assessment, trying to understand what the impacts and attention points related to the technology is. And this is inspired by the intersectional design cards approach, which is a very interesting established methodology that we have applied here. What this systems approach does is that it not only considers the function and form of a technology, but it also considers experience and services, which is the most typical way of understanding technology impacts. But then it broadens it up to also understand systems and infrastructures, an outer layer, and also the paradigm and the purpose of technology that it's a part of. So what kind of problems is it that it's trying to solve, and how does that influence intersectional issues? So it's broader than usual when you talk about technology impact assessment, and it's more diverse than when you talk about gender analysis typically. And then we applied it throughout the technology development process. So we started from the pre-project, or at least in the very best way of applying this technology or this methodology. You do apply it from the pre-project throughout the team composition, how you design the technology or how you plan the technology, and throughout the design of it, the testing, the beta testing, and the implementation. So it's a methodology that kind of follows a technology development process from the get-go to the very end. And of course, this hasn't been the case here because we are somewhere in the middle still. But this is kind of the ideal of it. So this is a very busy slide, I'm aware. But this is the effect of following a gender plus or GBA plus ontology. And this has a lot of points. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. One being this one. So it says what we kind of have to consider when we understand attention point related to technology development. One of them is that it's not sufficient to have women and minorities represented in the design team. That would be myself, for example, because gender parity, it does not change the necessity for GBA analysis to inform the design process. So just because I'm a woman and I'm present in the design process does not mean that I speak for women of all kind. Just because I have a different ethnicity does not mean that I am a spokesperson for all different ethnicities. So we need this GBA plus analysis in technology development despite having diversity in the design team. That's one point. The next one is that the GBA plus must be a part of every stage of the analysis, which is why I showed the timeline. So at the very ideal of it, this is one of the things that you think about in the beginning when you are getting an idea, trying to solve a problem. So it must be a part of the early stage and every stage until the very end. And you can use, for example, older GBA analysis. It's very valuable, but it's also very contextualized. So you need to understand the context. So when Søren talks about various scenarios for implementing this technology, it's the same case with understanding the gender plus issues. It's very contextualized. And the last element here is that the gender-based analysis plus should be started at the very beginning, which is what I said before. So a lot of pointers on how to understand gender attention points related to technology development. Here I've only just spoken of a few. Then in the specific project in Fit4Micro, what we did here to understand the attention point with the specific microturbine was that we did a workshop with the consortium members very willingly participating in discussing gendered issues related to the technology. And that was a very interesting workshop we have in Liège a couple of years ago, where I listed a long list of questions for the participants. And they could pick whatever they found useful and relevant related to the different stages of the design process. And related to different elements of understanding gender attentions. So I'm going to present to you now the most important results from these discussions. So this is related to the very specific technology that we are talking about today. So one of it that was pointed out by the participants is that related to the form and function and service experience, so the very inner core of the technology, something that should and could be considered is the noise levels of the technology. What we know is that when we talk about gender plus, specifically age in this particular incident, that we perceive and experience noise very differently. So young children and children in general experience noise very more severely than adults does. Maybe intuitively it makes sense because they have better hearings. So noise level is something that's considered, and maybe an effect of that, or a solution it could be, it was discussed that we need flexibility when it comes to shielding for noise according to where it's implemented. Here you could implementation in a kindergarten versus a regular residential building or school or wherever. Another element was that we discussed was the temperature. And this is also a case of needing flexibility. What we know from research is that men and women experience comfort temperatures or temperature in general differently. So we have different comfort temperatures. Women need higher or has higher comfort temperatures compared to men. And the effect of that is that women in the summertime, especially where you use the cooling element of the technology, women will feel it colder than men. So this is also a case where we need flexibility in temperature levels, and we need to be able to make different solutions for different users. A third result is that, or discussion point was that color palettes are relevant. For example, on interfaces, when interacting with the technology, colorblind people could have a challenge if you use a combination of colorblind colors, for example, red and green, that's not able to distinguish. I don't know how many of you can distinguish what I've written here in the cycle. If you can't see anything, that's because you're colorblind. But you need a color palette that kind of affords or caters to people with this very particular disability or challenge. Then our fourth one is that we see risk perceptions related to use of new technology, and this case the HPO biofuel is different according to age. So the older you get, the more kind of risk higher you perceive risk higher compared to younger people. So this is also something that's relevant not in the particular or specific design process, but it could be relevant or is relevant when you are communicating about how to implement different technology or this technology. You need to cater to risk perceptions by different recipients. So throughout these discussions related to function and form and service and experience of the technology, what we kind of landed on on a general level is that you need to understand diversity and you need to be flexible when implementing, particularly when implementing this technology, in order to make it inclusive for different genders and social categories. And of course, implementation kind of speaks back to the development of the technology. So you can't implement something flexibly if it's not flexible in the ongoing or in the onset. So that's why it's relevant for the design process as well. Yeah. Further results from the discussions with the consortium were related to a kind of an outer layer of the system related to systems and infrastructures. And here a result that we discussed was that the weight of spare parts, for example, or the refueling elements, canisters or whatever, I don't know what you use to refuel, can create barriers for maintenance personnel, for example, who are slightly built or disabled persons. When you assemble or if you service or if you change, you need different spare parts for the micro engine, then how big can you make them? And are you creating barriers for people to service this technology if you make them too big? This could be something to consider. Second one is that communication and marketing is important when catering to different ways of thinking. So what we see, and I'll return to this at a later point, is that men in particular are more prevalent when taking energy-related decisions or energy technology-related decisions, and women are less so. So that's a question of how you market. If you market this in the usual way, then what we will see, I expect, is that it will be men taking decisions related to whether or not to implement or buy this kind of technologies. So how can that be addressed in the way you communicate and market this technology as a way to kind of level out the decision-making participation through, across the genders? The last one, last point from the workshop was the level of technical knowledge we need to operate and maintain these kind of technology. How can we, this is also a question of communication. How do we communicate the technology, and how difficult is it to understand for people who haven't any training in understanding technologies? Would you be able to service these kind of this kind of technology as a building maintenance person, or do you need a second level or higher level education to do so? This is also something that could potentially create barriers for participation and for inclusion in, related to the technology. So a lot of interesting attention point, and this is particularly related to the CHCP technology. And if you take this step further away, then looking at the technology, the literature related to these kind of technology, energy technologies in general, we also see a couple of attention points that we didn't touch upon during the workshop. So I'm zooming a little bit out from the specific technology, but it's still something that's relevant for the Fit4Micro technology. So what we find here are 5 different attention points that's relevant to consider when participating and initiating these kind of technology development processes. First, energy technology is often designed according to the white cis male default. So what you see is that a lot of technology development has one setting, understanding of how a human is, and that is the white male. And you see a lot of different examples from this. Once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. We see example of, for example, heart monitors have difficulties doing exact measuring of people of color, because the technology, infrared technology, has a difficulty reading from their skin. You see that soap dispensers doesn't work for people of colors because they can't, the infrared can't read the color. You see that iPhones are, if you ask me, you have your iPhone next to you right now. If you grab that, it's very interesting to see that what we see is that men can use it with one hand. Women cannot. They always use 2 hands because there's different sizes of hands. You see that women are not protected to the same extent when in a car crash. Even though women are more safe drivers, they are to a great extent hurt when they crash, because crash test dummies are designed according to the male default, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different examples of this. So this is something we want to avoid, and it's something that has to change. But the first step is awareness and knowing that this is happening. And relating this to a heating and cooling and power technology is, of course, it's a translation process. Yeah. Okay, second one attention point is that women are the primary energy users and impact recipient. And what I mean by this is that women in households are the ones who are home the most. And this is on a very broad scale. And of course, there are contextualized examples where this is not the case. But on a general level, this is the case. And what we see is that when you have emissions that are hurting your health, for example, we see this with traditional technologies, biomass technologies, for example, women will be the main recipients of this. So they will have the health issues, they will have the lung diseases related to it. So it's worth considering that if you have adverse impacts from a technology, women will be the ones suffering from it the most. Third, energy roles are gendered. And what I mean by this is that for example, we are now seeing a implementation of smart technology in household, for example, for managing different technologies at home. Men are the typical ones interacting with the smart technologies at home. They are the one who has the apps on the telephones. They are the one who reads the numbers. But interestingly enough, women are the ones acting on the information. So we talk about resource men, who has all the resources and the understanding, in this case, the information. And then we talk about flexibility women, who are the ones being flexible when washing their clothes, or turning off the heat, or using energy when you have information about, for example, energy prices. So this is something that's important to consider when you are implementing a technology, also as the CHCP turbine. A fourth attention point is that we have generally an occupational imbalance in the energy sector. And this is, of course, in the outer layer of the system understanding. So we're not talking about services and technology, right, or services and uses of the technology, but we are on a more societal level now. And we see here that we have imbalances. A third of energy technology related jobs, we have women occupying those, and 2/3 are men. And we see we had a study from IRENA last year who found that women are generally paid 15% less than men. So we have imbalances here, and this is of course not something that you can address on a specific project such as Fit4Micro, but it's nevertheless something that needs to be addressed, just on a different level. What we can address in a particular technology development process is how you design your team. So what kind of social groups do you include? Some of the biggest barrier for this occupational imbalance, and the reason why we have 1/3 versus 2/3 distribution in the energy sector is, for example, hiring bias. So you hire what you know. So if you have more men in a design technology company, you will hire more men. And this is not something, it's very much unconscious, not something you do, but it's still there. So attacking or understanding these kind of biases is something we need awareness to understand. And this is the first step, of course, including these kind of perspectives into a Fit4Micro technology development project. The last one, we see a limited female decision-making power. So I mentioned before that we have resource men and we have flexibility women, and this is related to it. We find it on every level that when it comes to energy technology, it is men that takes the decisions. So it's in the household. What kind of energy technologies do you want or do you need? And it's also on a community level. For example, we see in community energy projects that it's predominantly men who participate in these kind of processes. And there are many explanations for that. And very low tech, women are at home caring for the children in the evenings where the meeting is taking place. So we call it time poverty. Women don't have the time because of the distribution of household at home. So we see that females participate in decision makings less. What we also see here is that, for example, when it comes to on a community level, we see less participation from ethnic minorities, religious minorities. And reasons for that are that we use the wrong communication channels, for example. So we don't reach the people that we need to reach. So if you participate in a meeting related to energy communities on a local community level, you will more or less most of the time find men over the age of 50. And that's it. So here we have a challenge as well, and but it is of course on the outer layer of the system understanding that's a little bit moved away from the specific technology. Yeah. Okay. So concluding on these findings related to gender attention points is, first of all, research and development people, which are my very good colleagues in this consortium, they will typically focus on the inner layers of the technology. And of course, so it is the design process that is focused. So if you see in the bottom corner here, function and form is something that you can relate to when you're working with technology development. Experience and services is something you have to consider because you need to implement it somewhere. And then it becomes a little bit fuzzy when it comes to systems and infrastructure and paradigms and purpose of the technology. So we did not cover that very much in the workshop, and it's very understandable. So my point is just that the design process is not the only place you can tackle gendered issues. You need to move out and tackle these issues elsewhere, policy makers and governmental institutions and so on and so forth. We need regulations to cover these issues. Yeah. So second point is that a gender plus analysis will improve a product. So it's not only something that we put on in order to make it more diverse and to make it more inclusive for the rest of the society, but it would also make a product better because it creates a more flexible approach to understanding the performance of a technology. Third one, we lack knowledge and interdisciplinarity in research and development processes and academia, just to speak from my own experience. We simply don't know how to tackle these issues. I found the workshop that we did in the consortium very, I was positively surprised compared to the discussions I've had with practitioners elsewhere. A lot of people just give up because it's not their area of expertise, and it's difficult, and it's inconcrete and it's complex, so it's difficult to discuss. So we need to include people who are able to discuss these kind of issues in design processes. So interdisciplinarity is rather important to include these aspects more efficiently. And this is one of my, in Danish you call it smertensbarn, I don't know the English term, but it's one of regrets, I'd call it, that we lack disaggregated data. So it's difficult actually to understand differentiated impacts on different social groups. Doing a gender plus impact assessment is difficult because we simply don't have the disaggregated data. We have men and women, mostly, often, but apart from that, it becomes very difficult. So now I've started to see that we have included a third gender, for example, but this is just baby steps. So when trying to understand impacts on social categories, we need to disaggregate a lot more. And last point, funding is a very good place to start. I think it's very nice that we have started to be included in technology development processes, which is new for me. And this is very much due to funding efforts from EU and other funding agents. So this is a very good start because awareness is the first step of addressing issues related to gender plus. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you for that. And I do remember our very engaged workshop in Liège a few years ago. It was a very well run workshop, and I also noticed, it struck me your final attention points to be very revealing as well, even as a male, white cis. But very, very striking and very interesting, and a lot to take into consideration there. So thank you for that. Just to let everyone know that we still have opportunities to answer any questions you may have. Maybe today's been a bit slow, but there is still time to type in a few questions. Maybe to kick things off, I'll turn to Soren first. In the presentation of the analysis of your results, you spoke about 5 different archetypes, or 5 different countries and different geographical locations, and you stressed that one of the main divergences is the geographical location of the applied technology. Is that due to like the feedstock in terms of fuel, or is it more geographical or climatic, or is it socioeconomic? And yeah, does your analysis also take into account the displacement of, carbon intensive electricities in these different countries?
The very short answer is yes. It is the combination of these things. the real point is that if we simplify the sustainability assessment to not look at these things, we get it very wrong. And so the point is that the avoided production or the alternative production. So if you have this system, our microgas turbine system, in a context where it's integrated, delivering surplus electricity to the surrounding energy system. If the surrounding energy system has its marginal production based on wind turbines, low carbon intensive electricity, clearly the benefit of delivering electricity is quite small. If you place the microgas turbine in a system where it's substituting carbon intensive energy production, it's logically very advantageous to do so. As Michelle presented in the beginning, it's also quite obvious that this energy system, the microgas turbine Fit4Micro system, is producing a lot of heat. Heat is a key effect of it. And of course, the Fit4Micro technology has the advantage of being able to produce cooling from the heat. But it's clear that the heating, using heat for heat is more efficient, basically, which of course means that this function is better in Northern Europe or in places where you have colder weather. So that's geography. So it's a combination, and the feedstock thing is actually also a regional phenomena. If you're looking at prices for straw, normally we regard straw as something kind of for free, but it's definitely not for free. Sometimes you'll have straw prices making out a bigger part of the farmer's business than the grain, especially in Northern Western Europe. Other parts, the straw will have a lower value of Europe. Very often, these feedstock resources, if they get sufficient high value, they will be basically it pays off to transport it longer. But when you have feedstocks of very low value, you will not transport them very long. So you can have regionalized effects of the feedstock thing too. And when we look into the feedstock, it's very important to having attention that we in Europe are entering a bioeconomy. We have a very strong strategy to use our biomass, which is of course good, but there are land area limitations to how much biomass we can produce. So the more we use biomass in our economy, the higher the price of it will be, and basically the idea of having wasted biomass resources is something that will. It's only a thing. It's a matter of time before that is before that's history. And in fairly near future, all biomass will be a resource, not a waste. So all of these different things is very, very important. Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you very much. Maybe one question for you, Sara. And I mean, obviously, when we're talking about the microgas turbine, it's not a consumer product per se. I mean, we're not installing them in individual homes. So in terms of your gendered analysis, would you imagine the results being different if you applied this to sort of, like an SME environment, more of a business environment in terms of, let's say, the decision-making process to acquire certain technologies? Would that be more different than say from a specific private consumer family home? Do you have any experiences or parallels that you can draw upon that could shed some more light on this?
Well, of course, dynamics are different from household to businesses, but there are a lot of. For example, when you come to service and function, for example, when you see the differentiation in comfort temperature, that's going to be existing still. And the use or the need for flexibility is something that's still going to be relevant in a business setting because we have people of different social categories. So flexibility will still be relevant. It's just going to be more difficult when you move it into a business setting compared to a household setting. It's easy to be flexible when you're in a household setting, less people to make decisions with. So in a business setting, I'm kind of seeing that it's going to be more difficult to include the gender perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me just quickly take a look at our Q&A function. I see that it's still empty. So I'll use that as the signal to wrap things up. So thank you again to both you, Søren, and both Sara and Michelle, who had to drop out. But thank you to all three of you for your contributions and for taking the time to share your expertise and analysis and the results derived from the different work packages within the Fit4Micro project. So thank you again for that. And for everyone's information, as you probably have noticed, we are recording this webinar. So if you have colleagues that had missed the webinar for whatever reasons, we do know it's still a bit of the holiday period. So we will make this available on the Fit4Micro YouTube channel, and we'll also make it available on the Fit4Micro website, and we will promote the recorded webinar via social media as well, so we can get it to as many people as possible. So on that point, I'd like to go to my last slide. Yes, so as I mentioned, this is a series of webinars that'll take us to the end of the project, the end of the project being at the end of September this year. So we plan between 5 and 6 different webinars focusing on different work packages and different work streams and outputs. So I'm pleased to announce, and this is more of a save the date, we will start marketing the webinar in the coming days. But the next webinar will be focusing specifically on the development of high efficiency two-stage microturbine, which is featuring a novel intercooled regenerative reheat gas turbine cycle. And this will actually be presented to us by Vard Bebe, who's an associate professor at Mons, the University of Mons. So look out for that. It will be taking place on the 4th of May, which I believe is a Monday, between 2 and 3 p.m. So look out for that. So in the meantime, thank you everyone for joining, and if you're watching this at a later time, thank you for taking the time to review the webinar. I wish everyone a pleasant afternoon and a pleasant weekend, and hopefully we'll see you again at the next installment of our webinar as part of the Fit4Micro webinar series. So thank you for that, and good day.